this month with two longtime gallery artists, Laura Ross Paul and Honor Neuschwander. And sometimes it's just kismet or whatever the right word is, where we're trying to schedule shows and someone says, I want this month, and then someone else is like, no, I can't do that. I want this month. And then it's like, oh, two artists laying together and the work, you never know what will happen, but then there's a dialogue with this figure. People keep saying, oh, you planned it so well. I wish I could say that we did that, but we're thrilled nonetheless. I want to introduce the staff of the gallery and thank them. Rebecca Rocco, the director of the gallery. Oh, there she is. And Wilder Schmaltz, assistant director of the gallery, and Lori Emerson, business director of the gallery. So if you have questions afterwards, please pull any of us aside and we can help you. We have coffee, and we didn't get treats, but we have coffee in that, so please stick around. And we'll start with Lori, and then we'll go into walking through Rana's show. And I want to ask everyone who has a handbag or a backpack to please maybe just take it off of your shoulders or your back while we're in Rana's show, because we might be tight quarters and we want to keep the sculpture on. Or you get to take some fragments. We also have work on paper here that we'll look at briefly, and I want to ask you, be careful and let us handle it. We've washed our hands. Oil and coffee spills, oil on your fingers, you might not think it's much, but after a few years, an oil stain from a finger will turn dark, and then we don't like that. So, let's give a round of applause to Lori.
Well, thank you, and I want to reiterate what Charles said about coming on this magnificent day. I all of a sudden saw how big the crowd was in my throat went dry. So anyway, I figured that either I'm saving you a trip to the gorge to look at waterfalls, or I'm inspiring you to go to the gorge to look at waterfalls. And I also want to thank Rana for, having such a kick-butt show, because I agree with Charles. It's such a great grouping, and I kind of think the gallery looks fabulous. So, and thanks Charles and Welder for your installation, which I also think turned out really great. And always, I got to thank Rebecca too, because she's just so amazing when you pull something like this out. And then I know quite a few of you were at the last talk I gave of the urban forest, and I have to kind of thank you for that too, because we made a group decision during that time that it was okay to reference things you find on Instagram if you are inspired by them, and I would never do that until there was even a guy, Nami's friend from, what we're showing with his friend from San Francisco who works for Instagram, is kind of a higher up, said, oh no, by all means. So thanks for that affirming that it's okay. I did lots of screenshots and have images all over my studio to draw from. But for the most part, the paintings that you see are internally developed. The one that's not, well, it is too, really. The river otters are a group of ladies my age and older from Manzanita, where we spend our summers, got me going on visiting the hidden falls in that area. They take a group of women. We'll go looking at falls and spend a hot day like this in the water, just frolicking. And so they kind of got me going, and I wanted to honor them. I'm just going to start telling you a little bit about where I was mentally, because I said in my statement, and I really think it's true, that when you go to visit a falls, you often hear the roar of it first, the noise of it first, and it puts you in a mental space of thinking what that might possibly look like when you get there. And it's that mental space where these were mostly developed. And I turned 65 this year, and my friend Sherry Wolf, who loves self-portraits, said, oh, you gotta do a portrait of yourself. And so this painting kind of got me going. And when I don't know if anybody's in that demographic, but you get stuff from Social Security and your doctor wants to give you a bunch of vaccines and you're just like, like welcome to the end or something. So
Medicare too.
Okay, well, yeah, you're right. And so anyway, I decided if I'm going to do a self-portrait, I wanted to get some insights from my child self and my maid self. And actually, this child, Grace Weston, on her Instagram had posted a great picture from a child in a fountain, and it inspired me. And so here's my child self, and here's my full of hormone self, and informing me how to paint my next phase. And I felt a little vulnerable, so I'm standing there naked, but I have my painting apron on. And these are made-up falls. I call them trident falls, because really sometimes I think of this water as streams of energy, and I think of artists kind of standing as an interface with universal energy coming through them that they process, and that becomes their artwork. And so these, I almost think of streams of universal energy that each of these are feeding off of, and now they're all kind of coming together. So that got me going. But also, in my statement, once I did this and I had the river art experience and was very committed to doing waterfalls and realized I'm processing the energies of my life, I wanted to really think through the metaphor of what part of a waterfall or how waterfalls are affecting me. And I just thought of the experience of being in the water, in a stream, just kind of like you might be floating along in life, just kind of you're in your groove and you're floating along. And maybe there's an edge, which I'm calling the event horizon, that you really can't see beyond. You might hear the roar, you just don't know what's out there, but you're going to it and you're in the groove. So one of the early paintings I did is around the corner, and you don't have to go to see it, but there's a woman wading in some still water going towards a big water hole. Many waterfalls coming together. That looks dangerous, but she's caught up in it, and she's kind of moving that direction, and she's in the safe place. But it's like when you decide, ooh, cookie sounds nice, I think I'll go have one. And then your other brain goes, no, I shouldn't. But there's a moment that you're going to go get that cookie no matter what. Well, it's kind of like that. You get in the groove of life, you're moving towards something, you don't know what's going to happen, and some of it, there's a zillion things that could represent that. And I see people when looking at, I had put out one of my watercolors, was somebody in the middle of going over the edge and just falling. If you're in this flow of water, maybe you're a drop of water or something, things happen in life, just like waterfalls or being in waterfalls. I'm sure you've all gone over, I know I have. It just happens so darn fast. You can't really process it while it's happening. There are moments of life, like my opening the other night, it just happened so fast. Anyway, there's moments in life that it just seems like it's fast time, and then you plunge down, and then when you come up in that first breath of air, which are my four heads over here, that sucking the air, you're no longer, you have a moment to process, but you're close to whatever happened, so you're kind of mentally still there, but you're reorienting. And that's why I had to do those heads 4 times. There's many moments in life of what I just talked to you happens, and I think that a lot of these are my way of processing that. But there's also other things that waterfalls represent. There's quiet, contemplative times, like the one Charles is right in front of. It's kind of, I think I call it quiet cascade, or this figure in the grotto, which in some ways might represent my husband Alex here, because I kind of did a male and a female big one. And I know a lot of people are thinking that's Odella Falls, which it wasn't, but I found an image of it on my wall among a million Waterfalls images in my studio, and I looked at it and I thought that must be influencing me because, you know, it really does kind of look like it. But just like, you know, quiet times in nature. I found someone right in front of this one which touched me so much because and she said to me, you really captured that quiet moment in nature where you're just feeling it and feeding off of it. And that thing I said about the universal energy just pouring down, maybe that is what that's about. There's one around the corner of a male figure that I was inspired by the sculpture of Auguste Rodin, and that's why I call it King August, but August. But also Bill Viola, if you've ever seen his, do you remember the name of that piece that we were, yeah, but anyway, the slow-mo where he has the figure immersed in the water. I love that. And this one, the Crisscross Falls, I'd been to China recently and was really struck how their Three Gorges area is so reminiscent of our Columbia River Gorge, and how, even though I didn't speak the language, I made a lot of heart connections with some Chinese I still am almost on weekly or sometimes daily contact with, and how similar they are to us in their heart and spirit, no matter what we hear in the news about corn killing dogs and things like that. And, you know, the regular, just day-to-day Chinese that you meet are so much like us. And I think I was just processing very much our common humanity and the places we live that, you know, they get very fed off their nature and they have many beautiful, pristine places. And then this one over here that I call Waterfalls is just sometimes it all seems to be going off at once, and it's just so overwhelming, and it just feels good. You can feel the mist, and you know there's places. I think I get that when I walk into a museum. I mean, I look over here and I'm like, you know, I'm just so inspired, and it's so overwhelming to me sometimes. I just love it, and I just want to be in it and in the energy of it, and I think that's it. And then I just want to say before, are we doing any questions? Are we going to have to talk for? Okay.
Hey, Lori.
Yeah.
If you talk about the work on paper, I think
we should move in there.
Yeah, and can you talk about the ones on the wall?
Yes.
And then
yes.
we'll be available to show the work on the table after the talk. It's just easier for a group to see.
Yeah, I think that would be easier than people could see them too. I definitely want to talk a little bit about these before we move on. So. If you can't see them, we'll... Okay, well, I will definitely admit I had some nervous energy about this show, and I'll just sort of say why. It's the first time... Wilder said this astounding thing to me right a couple weeks ago. He says, you know, Lori, this is your 44th one-person show. And I was like, what? You know, I mean, because it's felt so much like my first show. And so I had all this you know, the show was done earlier in the summer, but I had all this nervous energy, and I'd been product testing for Martha Bergman, who is here, a new product that she has developed with an art maker out of New York that is sort of a combination of a charcoal and a pastel. I think she started with the original, Martha, we can ask her questions, but I think she started with Raphael's original formula that she got from the Vatican, that he did all those cartoons for the murals he did in the Vatican. But the cool thing about it is, the way she's developed it, is that you can hit it with water and it becomes permanent, but it also makes it do watercolory things. So you rub your hands on it and it doesn't mush like pastel or charcoal does. So it's just, I can't tell you, it's just its own thing. You can also use it not only with water media, but with oil media. And so far I've just experimented with the water media, but I was doing that and I had all this nervous energy because it's the first time I had 3 kids at home, I haven't been teaching, I haven't been dealing with an illness or writing about an illness or writing a book about it and then traveling to support the book. It was just like I was reclaiming myself as a painter, and boy did that feel good. And I was like, oh my God, I used to be a painter and that was so great, and now I'm a painter again and it really feels great. So I had that kind of energy and I poured out all these watercolors, well, they're called figments, and so I poured out these figments, and since we didn't have time to frame them, I had Mark Mahaffey shingle lay them onto some stiff paper so we could display them. And luckily, they had more work than they needed, and luckily they took these. So I thank you guys. And anyway, so these. Just to tell you a little bit, I use a mulberry paper called Chidi. It has a little flecks of mulberry in it, and it doesn't have sizing, so it's very saturated. So I have to put stacks of them so that the paint gets sucked up. It's very much like working on rice paper, except for this paper, you can really torture it with tons of water and it doesn't disintegrate. It's tough. And I tend to push hard and draw hard and saturate, and that's what I do. So I like it. But to get me going, because like I said, these are internal watercolors. A lot of times I'd look at the blotters, which were just very beautiful, and that would start me out. I'd start finding and seeing a landscape in them. And bless their hearts, I have this group of artists. I don't see any of you from Manzanita, but they're probably out drawing or in the creek today, knowing it's hot down there. But anyway, I have a group of artist friends down at Manzanita that we get a model on Sundays, and they totally got into my project, and they started hiring models that they thought should be in my paintings and encouraging me to and so some are actually from that. But otherwise, people that would come see us at the beach, I'd make them, like this is my nephew Alex, and I'd make him teeter on the railing, and it's really dangerous, and it's down there, and and he's a good sport. He's used to me always doing this to him. So anyway, so and then we go down to Short Sands Beach a lot. My husband's an avid surfer, and some of our surfer friends, oh, waterfall, and they'd show you their cell phone pictures, and you'd go, oh, no, but there's some really amazing photographs of waterfalls. I got that way, so they'd start sending me, and so I have to credit, it's been a group effort, and there's, I love that. There's something about the energy. Let's face it, it's nature's way of making a change in elevation, most efficient. And I think just vertically, you have this white, and with the dark, you've got your 3 values, you have texture change. There's just so much about it that's compelling. I don't think I'd want to live around next to a waterfall, but I certainly wouldn't mind having one on my wall. So maybe I should just end it there.
Yeah.
Okay. Charles, is there time for questions, or is it time to move on?
Sure.
Okay, is there any questions? Yes.
Yes, I was wondering, do you do these paintings at the site itself, or just from memory?
Well, that's kind of a good question. I do not do them at the site. I do a ton of photo reference when I'm there, and but there was a group show that was here last winter that I did a bunch of small ones. Those were directly done from those reference photographs, but they taught me how to do waterfalls. So in my regular painting that I've always done, I don't work from any particular place. It's more a feeling of a place. So I've always told my students that, your starter button is either mental or heart, your emotions, and you try to get both in your paintings, but it's good to know which is the starter button. So for me, it's an emotional feeling, so I use that as my centering, and I I mean, they come to me like in meditation or just in the working process, because I think artists get in a meditative state. And so they're, you know, it's the relationship between me and the painting that invent them. And by the way, I want to point out, Martha, where did she go? Oh, here she. Because you artists here are going to have questions, and she even brought some of the figments that she will let you feel and. Right?
Yes,
Yeah. So you can feel what they feel like, and so this is the person. If you have questions about that. So anyway, so they're all pretty inventive. And like I said, these were the Rorschachs. You can see the model, you know, the modeling like the looks like clouds. So that was from the water from the painting that was above it, and the modeling on the rock. But I like it because it has that old, but the colors are new and bright, so it's kind of old and new at the same time. And they're soft. They don't have super sharp edges because there's no sizing on the paper. But doing the first layer kind of sizes it, then you can get a little more detail. So then you can get the figures to have edges to them. So that's kind of how. And they are almost as saturated on the back. Mark made us photograph the backs before he glued them down because he said, you're going to want to remember these. And I think that's really sad.
Where do you get the mulberry paper?
They carried a blick. It's called Chidi, C-H-I-D-I. Chidi, but yeah. Other questions? Yeah, I think always, I've had, my only one person show at the Portland Art Museum was on my watercolor work on that paper. And the curator writing about me at the time was John Weber, who wrote just a fabulous piece. They have it in a book here if you ever want to read it. And it was his, he used to come and hang out with me in my studio while I was dealing with my kids. And he was really, you know, my connection to the art world for a good number of toddler years. But anyway, he would see me do these things, and he'd see that I wouldn't think of them as my serious painting, which Martha has helped me change my attitude on that. But the way he saw that I used them was to bump me into a headspace that I would then deal with in my oil painting. And he said, really, your first work that was your mature artist voice came out of your watercolors. So that's why I revisit them from time to time, because they really are the way I move into the next level, is how I call it. So. Yeah.
I'm curious just about your process. Do you like set to work with the oils and do that for a while, or are you doing that and watercolors maybe at the same time?
This time I only did the watercolors all together, and I only did but sometimes I mix it up, and yeah, and I have, you know, like they're all going at the same time, and yeah, I get a lot, you know, because my kids always hung out in my studio and their friends, that it's still, I get a lot of hanging out while I'm painting, you know, and it sort of bugs me that people see them unfinished because they don't, you know, it's in here how they're going, but a lot of times they don't pull together until the end because they just take so many layers, you know. Each of them have been visited multiple times. So with both, I do an oil and wax technique that genius over here helped me develop. I mean, if anybody ever has anything crazy they want to do with any kind of art materials, this is the gal you ask, and she'll work in her studio until she figures it out. But anyway, so I wanted a melted wax look without using torches, and so she helped me figure out with products how to melt down a wax and pour it on top of oil. And you know, and we're kind of a good tag team because, you know, I push and push and push, and she pushes, and then when I get a problem, then she solves it, you know. Yeah.
How much time did it take you to turn out this wonderful, huge body of work?
It's been probably well over a year. I mean, I turned
65 years.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of right, because I realized that, and especially when Walter said, you know, you've had 44 one-person shows, that every time I tackled a painting in a certain way, all those different types of approaches have been layered somewhere. It's not like I toss it out and do it a different way. It's like I incorporate the new thing, and I incorporate the new thing, and then I go back to the old thing, and you know what I mean? So this is, you know, luckily there are still a few things that, you know, there's other practices, martial arts or whatever, that you get better the older you are, because it becomes muscle memory and twitch and all that, you know, and luckily, I really do think I remember being in my 20s and just thinking, God, there's stuff I want to do in painting, and I'm probably not going to be able to do them until 20 years from now, because it's going to take me that much time to get it right. And, you know, for any of you, I'm kind of glad that this is a bit of an older crowd. We have a few really young people here, but I can say this, that that's a wonderful thing about aging, right? Because you really, if you kind of keep going with something, I mean, you're just like, you know, you get informed by all that, but it gets culminated in your now, and that's kind of wonderful. So yeah. And John Weber pointed that out, and I want to say, I mean, it sucks in a way because everybody's so interested in younger artists and new looks, but he said really that it's the older artists that come into their own and start using it all, and you know, maybe long after they've gone out of fashion or something, they're doing their kick butt paintings, and sometimes they get, you know, rediscovered, which I hope, you know, but that's kind of really true. I think you just get better, and that's why I think artists paint until the day they die, you know, because it feels good to do it.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
I wanted to make one comment because I've been wanting to talk to you, and I keep stopping you when we see each other. I have to talk to you. You say, yeah. I just wanted to make the comment. It's not a question, but a comment, and that is when I first walked in, these pieces weren't set yet. They were still on the floor, and they were putting things around. But I was completely knocked out, and I have to tell you, I'm looking at them, and I see these beautiful figure studies, and I say, yes, I know figure studies, but this, you're doing a figure study of the nature of the waterfall and a figure study of the human. And for the first time, they don't seem staged or forced. The figure study is in its proper place, and they are absolutely outstanding. Thank you. I love this series that you're doing. It was so powerful to see a figure study the way it should be. I don't know, it was just lovely for me. It just struck. And I thought, this is the perfect series. This is the perfect complement of each other, of these powerful waterfalls and their study and the human figure. It's really beautiful. Thank you.